Exploring the darkest visual novel, The Song of Saya, by Haedal? Regardless, we'll look at it. Interesting. Never heard of this one. Now this one also is interesting. Let's see. Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Song of Saya is not a game. It's a visual novel, meaning that it has one degree of dynamism above a book.
Visual novel. It's barely a game. People call visual novels game. I just call it book plus.
And that implies two things. First is that if you're nearly as ADHD boosted as I am, the story has to be really good to keep you playing. And second, making an intro to something like
I tried maybe playing a few visual novels because they said they were good. People said they were good, but I can't do it. I can't do it. It's like a snoring. It's a snoring festival. I'm sorry.
this is practically impossible, so let's just get to it. This game is fucked up, bruh.
This game is fucked up, bruh. Well, if that's a statement I'm hearing, then here we go, I guess.
Delves into the depths of depravity and shows what a horrible situation can do to someone's sanity and moral compass. It is also a love story, a gore fest, and a tale of
love story, gore fest. Okay, then get ready. Visual novel. They have one Punch Man animation. Wait, you mean sliding across a field of grass and supposed AI allegations?
Psychological horror. Before we begin, two important things. First, spoilers, obviously. I will be going over the story and the endings over the course of 2 videos. And second, if you haven't played it, go ahead. The censored version is on Steam, and you won't regret it unless gore and excessive violence, both physical and sexual, distresses you. And I mean it, even though I tried to make this
content warning. Here we go.
Video funny, the story itself is anything but. It is objectively horrendous and explores some of the most awful scenarios you can conceive of. If you're more on the sensitive side, please exercise caution. I will show gore in this video, so if that disturbs you, either just listen to it or go watch something else. Okay.
Guys, leave now if you don't like gore.
This game tells a story that explores some of the darkest, most morbid situations conceivable. The premise is simple yet very captivating. Our protagonist is none other than the sanest med student known as Sakisaka Fuminori. He's a college student who—
Med students are insane. Period. Med students are insane, period. They are not. Why would anybody with a sane mind willingly essentially go into human butchering? Anyways.
Got in a car crash that killed his entire family and left him in a coma for a while. After weeks—
Classic. Yeah, that probably leaves some brain damage and change.
In intensive treatment, his condition began to very gradually stabilize, but the doctor attending to him knew that Fuminori had sustained some pretty bad brain damage, just like you do after watching my videos. The only way he could possibly survive and live something that could even remotely resemble his normal life would be if he went through an experimental procedure. And that's what he did. But the effects and the extent of his cognitive deterioration would only be known once he woke up. And with the exception of temporary cortical blindness, he seemed to be doing fine. While blind but lucid, Fuminori came to terms with the accident and stayed resting in the hospital for a while. But one day his vision unexpectedly returned, and the first image to grace his vision was this.
Oh! Oh, everything's made of flesh. Well, that's tasty, buddy. Tasty!
The clean, sterile room he was supposed to be recovering at is covered in entrails and blood. The nurses and doctors that were supposed to be tending to him are these shambling amalgamations of gooey flesh. Needless to say that this scares the shit out of him, and the first time his friends from college come to visit him, he was reduced to a screaming, terrified mess of a man. It took some time for—
Did they actually just fry his brain with the procedure? They just like, what they gave this man, whatever, and said, roll with it.
Fuminori to understand what was going on. He eventually realized that he hadn't died and gone to hell, but rather that some unknown neurological process somehow managed to override all his 5 senses in a way that makes everything look, sound, smell, taste, and feel as bad as humanly possible. He is still in the real world, but his perception of everything has been severely altered. To quote what he says in-game, "It was as if an insane architect took the blueprints out of my life and rebuilt it out of blood and gore." In my opinion, the most nightmarish thing about Fuminori's condition is that closing your eyes isn't enough. There will still be awful sounds, smells, and textures that won't go away if he's not looking at them. And worst of all, he still has to
They cooked this man's entire nervous system. What kind of procedure did they do? What did they touch in his brain? Again, most sane med student, clearly. No med student is sane. And no doctor sane.
To eat. Even though the only thing his senses can perceive is this hellscape where everyone looks like the brain of Menses, his body is still in the real world and it still needs to sustain itself. Every day he will have to pick something to consume, but regardless of how tasty the food may be in the real world, to Fuminori it will feel like he's eating a mix of intestines, rot, and shit. Needless to say that he wanted to minimize that experience as much as possible, and as a consequence he became a lot skinnier and sickly looking than he previously was. Another thing Fuminori realized is that if anyone were to find out that he went cuckoo, they would probably take him to a mental institution and experiment on him. Given that he was trapped in the hell of his own perception, he at the very least would prefer to roam free rather than to be locked.
Interesting. So the premise is that the guy had an accident. They doctored on him, which completely destroyed all of his senses, essentially. And replaced everything with like a fleshy world. Crazy.
In a single room and used as a guinea pig. So for that reason he kept his condition a secret, pretending as best he could that everything was okay. Eventually he was discharged from the hospital to try to return to a David Cronenberg's reimagination of his own life, but not before having something even weirder happening to him on a particular night.
怖くないの？私のこと。
Bro sees random chick. Everything's made of flesh. But the ladies are hot. Hey. C. Okay, C. Okay, let's unpack this. Yes, it may smell like shit. Yes, everything looks like shit. Yes, everything tastes like shit. But the girls are hot, so win in a way. That's like you win in a way. Now here's the question though: if everything looks horrid, that looks good, could that mean that she's actually real life absolutely looking grotesque? Still win? That's a win. I'd argue.
These are the first words he heard Saya speak, the first human voice he heard since his vision returned. Needless to say that he was overwhelmed by emotion upon finally seeing a normal human. In the distorted hellscape that is Fuminori's reality, Saya is like an angel, an image that is rather blatant in the game's cover art. Her pure white dress and innocent appearance contrast greatly with the walls of pulsating, rotting flesh. Fuminori can't help but feel enthralled by her. Who wouldn't, really, given the situation that he was thrust into? That being said, what the f*** is up with her forehead? Like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, her eyes too, though.
If I were to walk the distance from her eyes to her hairline, by the time I was done, this channel would have 100k subscribers.
What the fuck?
But I digress. You will learn to love Forehead Wife as she is pretty much the most
Forehead wife! Crazy work.
likable character in the whole visual novel, for now. You need only look at Fuminori to see how he develops a bit of an obsession for her, to the point that one day, when he gets discharged from the hospital, the following scene ensues. On the night before my release, I summoned all my courage and asked her, "Are you going to stay here forever?" "Yeah, I couldn't learn anything about my dad, but it's not like I have anywhere else to go. I guess I'll just stay as long as I can hide." In other words, there was nothing keeping her there. "Why not stay with me?" I asked timidly. The question took all the courage I had. "Huh? My family's gone, and I have plenty of room. You won't need to hide, and it's not a bad place to live." He asks for her to go live with him, and she agrees because Saya too is an outcast in a way, but also in exchange for Fuminori help.
Buddy, Saya ain't real. That's what I'm saying. If everything around you's fake, then she is too. Especially, yo, maybe that works. Slap that forehead, crazy. Guys, realize this. You can't just ask a woman to go live with you. That doesn't work. I hear the sound of the whoop whoop. That's the sound of the police. Let's get this man out of here. Jail right away.
Helping her find her father, a man known only as Dr. Masahiko Ogai, who used to work at the very hospital he was staying at but disappeared about a year and a half before the story began after some incident. Thus begins the actual story of the visual novel, and we see how this girl becomes the center of Fuminori's world, the only thing that will embrace him in this awful hellscape, and how this love he has for her and his disdain for everyone else eventually turns him into an awful person. As you play through the story, you begin to realize that Saya doesn't seem like an entirely normal person either. There are many little details about her that are
Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. She sees the same shit as he does. Yeah, no shit.
off. For one, Fuminori never sees her eat anything, she only ever goes out at night, and she tells Fuminori that she will never abandon him because he and he alone is the only person who accepts her as she is. Quite odd, because she is described in the story to be almost indescribably perfect by both Fuminori and some other guy. At the actual start of the visual novel, the two have been living together for a little over a month according to my calculations, and the relationship gets very strong very fast. How strong, you may ask? Yes.
Yes! Yeah. Yeah, yes. How strong? Yes. Sex. Classic.
Anyways, every day is basically torture for Fuminori, but he endures it knowing that he can return home to Saya. He says in-game that she alone is the reason why he's still alive. Every day he goes to college, and
I may live in a world that looks absolutely horrible and grotesque, but at least I got my wife. Again, a win is a win.
after classes are over, he spends the rest of the day trying to find clues to determine the whereabouts of Dr. Ogai. Once he's done, he returns home to Saya, and they demonetize each other and go to sleep. One thing
They demonetize each other. That's diabolical. I've never heard somebody say it like this, huh?
that is very well portrayed in the visual novel is how much Fuminori utterly despises anyone who is in Saya. He complains about their smell, the way they speak, and how they never seem to leave him alone, despite him doing his very best to stay as innocuous and invisible as possible. As time progresses, he becomes more and more fed up with the flesh monsters he has to deal with on a daily basis, and more
Well, does it really make him a bad person? I think everybody who would live now in a world that consists completely of flesh, right? And everyone is a grotesque thinking flesh monster, right? You know in your head that they're not, right? But they smell, they look horrid, and he actively tries to avoid them. Of course you get annoyed and frustrated. It does make sense.
more obsessed with returning home to Saya. Now is the time to mention three characters that I haven't talked about yet: Yo, Koji, and Omi. The latter two are
He pulls out. I cannot lie. That is a big forehead. You could land a plane on there.
a couple, while Yo has a crush on Fuminori. Together, the four of them used to be besties, but after the accident, Fuminori started to see them as disgusting flesh monsters, so he started to build a wall between them and him. He doesn't cut contact immediately in order not to arouse any suspicion, but his friends can clearly see that there's something wrong with him. The post-accident Fuminori is a far cry from the person they once knew. He's a lot more reserved and dismissive, as you'd expect, but he's also a lot thinner, probably both due to the stress and the awful taste of everything he eats. But most importantly, they have no idea about his condition. Nobody does, except for Saya. They just assume that this change in behavior is due to the trauma of losing both his parents, but the way he starts acting becomes a bit too disruptive to ignore. Eventually, it all comes crashing down when Yo decides to confess her feelings for Fuminori. She had already done that in the past, and he said he would think about it, but then the accident happened. She gave him time, but after 3 months, she decided to hear an answer from him. And she did. Like I said, Fuminori was already pretty fed up with having to deal with these monsters every day, so when she finally went to confront him, it wasn't pretty. Come to think of it, I never gave you an answer, did I? I never saw you in any special way before. When you asked me out, I wasn't really sure how to respond. I didn't know how I felt about you back then. But now I can give you an answer. I've had plenty of time to think it over, you know? I hate you, Tsukuba. I don't even want to look at you.
Shots fired! Yeah, well, that's trauma. That's trauma. Well, whole phase incoming.
I suppose it is too much to hope to never see you again. We do go to the same school. So, just make this the last time you ever speak to me. Your voice makes me sick. This is the moment when Fuminori finally let his mask slip, and Yo is reduced to tears as she runs away from the man who was once the target of her affection. Omi and Koji had been peaking their interaction, and being Yo's best friend, Omi's pissed off at Fuminori. She tells Koji that she'll go to his house to give him a piece of her mind. I'm sure nothing's gonna go wrong with that one. Well, she goes to his house, sees that the front yard is overgrown and that all the storm shutters are closed, and decides to investigate it further. She enters the house and hears some up distorted voice saying "Welcome home," and also sees that Fuminori's shoes are not at the entrance. She carefully begins to investigate the house and starts to find a lot of weird things. For one, the place smells awful, not just
Distorted voice. That's odd.
because Fuminori painted the interior of the house to cover all the guts, but also because there's some foul smell of rotten flesh coming from somewhere inside. She hears and feels something slimy lingering just out of sight, then goes to the kitchen or the living room or some shit like that, I don't actually remember, and fucking dies as Saya does an aerial takedown on her. Okay, it isn't really that clean because the game basically tells her that she isn't even able to process the pain of having her stomach ripped open as the very sight of the thing attacking her.
Wait, so the chick... I knew... Man, I am good. Holy fuck, I am good. I am good. I am really good. Remember how I said at the beginning, everything else around them looks horrid because it looks normal? And she looks beautiful because she looks grotesque? Remember how I said that? I can predict the future. Call me Shulk. What is going on? Hey, I am good. Yes. Perfect.
Is enough to drive her insane. Fuminori, who had been looking for more clues about Dr. Ogai, eventually returns home to see that Saya is eating something while sitting on the floor. I wonder
She's eating the chick.
what that is. To Saya's surprise, Fuminori isn't shocked or even mad at her. On the contrary, motherfucker begins to eat the
Bro, what the fuck? Oh, cannibalism. Here we go. It's always cannibal every single time. It's always cannibalism. Every goddamn time it is cannibalism.
food off the floor as well, and tells Saya that it's f***ing delicious.
That is horrible.
From here, we can already begin to form a few theories as to what exactly is happening. To Fuminori, everything in the world seems absolutely repulsive, but other than Saya, the only thing that looks appealing to him is the pile of gore on the floor of the kitchen that was once his friend Omi. From this, it would appear that Fuminori's brain basically flips everything in the world that looks normal into something awful, and flips everything awful into something nice. Can you see where I'm going with this? Anyways, more shenanigans ensue, and Koji and Yo begin to realize that Omi went missing.
Essentially, Saya looks actually like the flesh monsters. Pretty much, Yopoka is fucked if someone accuses him of pro-cannibal. It's over.
With Koji being the only one who actually knew where she was headed in the first place. But the truth is that nobody really knows what happened to her, not even Fuminori, since he had no idea that the yummy snack he had a couple of days ago was actually one of his friends. Koji eventually catches Fuminori skipping class, but instead of confronting him, he decides to follow him. Fuminori takes a train heading to the direction opposite to his house and disembarks in a quiet suburban neighborhood some 30 minutes away from central Tokyo. He enters an abandoned house and stays there for the rest of the afternoon, all while Koji is observing from a small playground nearby. Once Fuminori leaves the house, Koji decides to head inside. He sees that the house had belonged to someone named Ogai, and doing his investigation, he finds that the place was left abandoned for over a year. Not only that, but he also notices how parts of the house are covered with some weird, foul-smelling slime. He goes upstairs to find a study with a lot of books on advanced medical practice as well as some weirder tomes open on the table. The first one, Traité de Chiffres, is about semiotics, which is basically the study of symbols. The second, Ars Magna et Ultima, is about divination.
So, here is my theory. The doctor created Saya, and Saya is the reason why the guy, the main character, sees everything the way he does. So she no longer feels alone. But if they had... Ew! They had sex, didn't they? Ew! Bro, ugh. That's gross, bro. Whoa, get out of here. Goodness, ugh!
Which is the thing that Mona does, basically predicting the future. And the last one, the Voynich manuscript, is written in code, so Koji can't exactly figure out what the contents are. But according to Google, it has information on astronomy, cosmology, as well as herbology, balneology, and pharmaceuticals. After he's done perusing the books, he continues on to investigate the rest of the house, eventually finding a bathtub completely filled with animal bones. Finding that scares the shit out of him, and as he's recovering from the shock, Fuminori appears behind him and promptly scares the shit out of him again. While Fuminori isn't happy to see him, he explains to Koji that a friend of his lived in that house and that he was just running some errands for her, and then says that he would very much appreciate if Koji was to stop prying into his business. Then the two of them leave and go their separate ways. Lovely. Fuminori returns home and has a brief exchange with his neighbor, who asks if he wants any help mowing his lawn, because after all it looks like a f***ing jungle. Then he heads inside to find that Saya isn't home. She takes a while to return on that day, but when she does, she has all of his medical records that she stole from the hospital. As she's analyzing them, Saya says that she could try to do something that might cure Fuminori's condition, but she has to practice first. The next morning, she goes over to the neighbor's house to do a little trolling, but we will get to that in just a moment.
Trolling. Yeah, that dead. Fellas, that guy's dead.
Fellas, this baddie over here is Dr. Ryoko Tanbo, Fuminori's attending physician, and without any contest,
And she doesn't have a ginormous forehead. That's a plus.
my favorite character in this game. There was a scene earlier that I didn't show of Fuminori having an appointment with her, but he basically sits in a corner being as dismissive as possible, asks about Dr. Ogai, and then leaves. Dr. Tanbo knows that the hospital covered up an incident involving Dr. Ogai pretty well, so there was no reason why anyone, let alone a patient, should even know about his existence. She was already a bit suspicious of Fuminori when he said he was fine even though he clearly wasn't, and then he was friends with one of Ogai's relatives, which is weird since he didn't have any to begin with. Couple that with Koji and Yo making an appointment with her to discuss their friend's weird behavior, and that Koji saw him breaking into the Ogai residence, and now she has very good reasons to be concerned. She tells the two of them that she can't disclose any information, but she will do some investigation on her own, and finishes the meeting by giving Koji her private phone number. Back to the neighbor. His name is Yosuke, and he's basically a house husband who spends his days tending to the house and painting while his wife and daughter are at
House husband. That's my dream, guys. That's me.
work and school respectively. On this fine day, as he was painting, he gets a bit thirsty and goes down to the kitchen only to feel a faint breeze. This was weird because he had closed all the windows, and upon investigating, he
Yeah, bro, it's gonna be food.
found that one of the windows had a hole produced by some sort of chemical. Naturally, this makes him quite alarmed, so he grabs a big ashtray to use his weapon and begins to look for whoever might have broken into his home. As he's doing that, our beloved flesh amalgamation wife, who had been hiding under the couch, seizes him with a bunch of flesh tendrils and proceeds to lobotomize him while he screams for mercy. He wakes up a couple hours later in a fleshy reconstruction of his own house, and he is going mad. His wife and daughter return home at that precise moment. Right now, Yosuke is basically experiencing the same thing that Fuminori had.
Bingo! Bingo! I said it! I knew it! She was the one doing it to him. She was the one, twisting his mind. I knew it!
And we will soon see that this is more than enough to drive him completely insane. His wife goes up to the studio to see what was going on, and as soon as he sees her as a flesh monster, he proceeds to kill her in a very graphic scene. But don't
Damn, he killed his wife.
worry, it gets much worse. His daughter is still a child, and she doesn't really understand what is going on. As she's trying to make sense of the situation, the guy goes and brutalizes her as well. In that moment, he no longer feels afraid. On the contrary, he feels powerful knowing that he's able to kill these horrendous monstrosities, even though it wasn't enough to get him out of this nightmare. He takes pride in knowing that he could defend himself, that's all. And that's when Saya appears as her normal self and sorta tries to interview him to see if her little experiment worked, and that proves to be an awful mistake. You see, this man is very far from being sane at this point, so the moment he sees the only non-horrible thing in this world of nightmares, his first and only impulse is to have it. Have her. The moment Saya realizes that, she runs back to Fuminori's house. He runs after her, and in a very tense scene, Yosuke begins to... yeah. Okay.
Damn! Damn! Damn!
Real talk, if you don't want to hear me talk about this, just skip to this time. As far as I'm aware, this game has two versions. There's the Steam version, which is relatively censored and safe for streaming and shit, and there's also the uncensored version, which is the one that I have. And I thought that by getting it, it would show me more gory f***ed up shit, but no. What it did show me are sex scenes. A lot of sex scenes. 3 up until this point, and not a single one of them felt comfortable to read. This could be the fault of localization, since I am playing the game in English instead of Japanese. It could be a fault of the author, or it could be my fault, since my dumbass decided to go with the uncensored version.
And I'll be like, why is there sex in this visual novel? My brother in Christ.
In any case, if this scene's objective was to leave the player uncomfortable, it worked very well with me, but for the wrong reasons. Now, I know that some people are into dubious consent and non-consensual, and honestly, it's fiction, so as long as you're not hurting anyone, I don't really give a shit. However, from a storytelling perspective, this is a bad scene. The story takes all agency away from Saya just for the sake of showing a scene of sexual violence. You mean to tell me that the same Saya who can melt glass—
So the flesh monster. Okay, let me unpack this. Guys, let me unpack this. Flesh monster, first of all, has sex with normal dude. Flesh monster gets raped by another dude. What the fuck is going on? What is this?
Kill small animals, drive people mad by merely glancing at her, does neurosurgery with multiple appendages, and f***ing ripped a girl's stomach open, is now helplessly crying as a middle-aged man is assaulting her. I had a theory that maybe her powers didn't affect the people who saw her as a human, but that is disproven like 3 minutes later. This scene is just here for the sake of having a sex scene and doesn't even bother giving a good justification. And that pisses me off.
I just need some hentai. Hi GT, how you doing? You're doing good. Hello.
It's fucked up to think about this, but I believe that this scene is simply a product of a game published in 2003 in a country that isn't exactly known for giving women a lot of agency. But yeah, rant over. Fuminori eventually arrives home and plays Fruit Ninja with Yosuke's body, and then immediately goes over to Saya to comfort her.
Fruit Ninja.
This is when she confesses that she experimented on him, and what she says is kinda heartbreaking. She thought that since Fuminori was always so nice to her, if everyone else saw the world the way he did, they would all be nice to her as well. Yeah, she tells Fuminori that she can fix his head by doing the opposite of what she's done to Yosuke to him. Ah, if only it was that simple. Did you break your leg? Just break it the other way, silly. This is when the game gives us an option. Accepting it will land us in our first ending, while declining it will continue the story.
So, I want it all, you die. Right? You want it all? I want it all back, you die. Don't need it anymore, you go to jail. Regardless, the end is the same, I think.
Since the game still goes on for a while after this, I will explain this ending now and leave the other ones for the next part. The moment Fuminori accepts Saya's offer, he begins to have second thoughts. The truth was that he would be more than willing to endure the gore reality as long as Saya was with him, and that feeling stays with him for the rest of his life. Saya does a lobotomy-themed makeout session with him, and he wakes up a couple hours later in his house. This time everything looks normal, but Saya isn't there. He calls the police and confesses to having killed Yosuke. They come to arrest him for that, plus the deaths of Yosuke's wife, child, and Omi. Fuminori is taken to a mental institution where he will presumably live the rest of his days, but one night he gets a surprise visit from Saya. He wakes up in the middle of the night to the sound of something crawling outside his room, and he instinctively knows that it's Saya. Though when he tells her that he wants to see her and hear her voice, she slips a phone under the door with a text message saying that she doesn't want to be seen and that she wants to preserve the memory he has of her. The two talk for a little bit, and in a very heartfelt moment, Fuminori tells Saya that he loves her, and even though they can't see each other, Fuminori knows that she is crying. He then asks her what she will do for the future, and she tells him that her plans will probably be to try to find her father.
That's gonna be the good ending, isn't it? Okay, Croc. That there's a part 2, by the way, if you ever want to watch it. Hey, I'm invested. At this point, I gotta do the part 2.
Dr. Ogai, and maybe find a way to get back from where she came from. The two bid each other farewell, and Saya slides away from his cell, probably never to be seen again. What I got from this ending is that Fuminori understood that Saya wasn't human and that she perhaps was a lot more abnormal than what he previously thought. But even so, he loves her and still thinks of her every day, which is surprisingly positive. His love now transcends anything related to physical appearance, and he is bonded with the soul of this horrible eldritch monstrosity baby girl forever. Isn't it cute? And yeah, this is the best ending, the one that lands him in a sanatorium forever and alone. I'm gonna end the video here because the script is already like twice as long as what I usually—
That was insane. This is an insane visual novel.
go for, but part 2 will come out soonish since I already have everything written. And in it we will go through the rest of the story and the other endings, of course. But yeah, that's about it for me. Like the video if you want me to make a lobotomy themed makeout session ASMR.
Get this man out of here. Disgusting. This was a good ending. He knew she's a flesh monster and yet he still loves her. No, it's also the good ending because I think the madness, if you make the choice to not, I'm assuming that if you make the choice to not return everything to normal, shit just gets worse. I'm assuming shit just gets worse. That is what I'm assuming for the next part. But yeah, that was interesting and crazy. Anyways, like, comment, and subscribe.